And she'll do the announcement. Oh, there we are. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting for July 26, 2023. I got the date right. Very good. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Castro, will you please give us the TV coverage announcement?
Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are Friday at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. This hearing will also be streamed live on CSB TV and will be available for download in a day or two.
Well, thank you. And will you go ahead with the roll call?
Commissioner Cooney?
Here.
Commissioner Braley? Braley? Commissioner Fernie?
Here.
And for the record, Martinez is absent. And Chair Park?
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Seawards, you're filling in today, is that right? Yes. Why don't you take a shot at the agenda status report?
Thank you, Commissioners. Today we have an appeal of the Medi Edibles project from the concerned Carpenterians. That is our only item today. Next, do I keep going?
Yes, why don't you go ahead with the projection report?
Sounds good. Next week we have two items, a rock climbing gym at the Magnolia Shopping Center. And then we have an appeal of some accessory structures and landscaping in the first district. And that hearing will be up here. All the hearings will be up here for the foreseeable future. On August 9th, we have a 65402 related to the Keysite 2 project. The appeal, the Roundup Road entrance gate will be coming back to you. We will be giving you a memo. They are going to be asking for a continuance, so that should be coming to you shortly. August 9th, the revision, the Strauss Wind Energy Project will also be coming back. And then we have a Walker Trust water tank project, and that is in the first district. So that's a pretty full day. On August 30th, the agenda is closed because there's a workshop for related to the rec master plan all day. Okay, September 6th is empty. September 13th, we have an appeal of a wireless project, Camino Mallorca. You might know it also as Trigo Road. This one's coming back to us again.
Right.
Okay. And September 13th, there is an appeal of the CP1 odor abatement plan. So that project is coming back. A lot of repeat projects here. And you will also be hearing the environmental justice element of the comp plan.
Okay.
On September 27th, interesting item for you all, which is ordinance amendments related to the ADUs. So, okay. And let me see. And that is it for the PC.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Any questions?
Yes. Commissioner Bradley.
Sorry.
Stand-in Director Seward. Do you have any update on the housing element, housing element projected meetings when we might see it?
I'm going to put Director Plowman on the spot. She does have a report for you, and she's very intimately involved in all things housing elements. So I do not have that information.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
And Commissioner Cooney, did you have a question as well?
I do, just about the workshop for let's see, it's on the 30th. It's the only item we have. Is there any schedule for our meeting that day? Do we have any idea how long it might go?
I can address that.
Thank you.
We'll start with the normal starting time. There'll be presentations by Jeff Lindgren of the Parks Department, by Director Plowman, P&D, and also by Jeff Wilson and Tina Mitchell of P&D, and Dan Giroir of the WSP consultant firm for parks. And we may have some other appearances, so to speak, on the workshop. So it'll be a presentation, and then there will be plenty of time for planning commissioner comments and questions. And if we're done by the end of that day, we'll start public comment, and we'll schedule another day to finish public comment if we need it, and to provide answers to any questions and things that come up.
Yes, I was concerned about public comment, and even if we haven't gone through everything, I think we probably need time to allow the public to react to the presentation up to when they get to speak. There's a lot of interest, as you know, in
Right,
the
right.
master plan.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we'll be finished with the presentation so that we can start public comment that day. That's my goal. And I'll make sure it happens, let's put it that way. Okay. Any further questions about the projection report? Then let's go on to public comment. And this is public comment for matters that are not on our agenda today. We limit that to 15 minutes total, and typically I'll ask that anybody who's making public comment limit their comments to 3 minutes. And again, it's for items not on the agenda today. Do we have anyone in the room that desires to make public comment of that sort? No. Do we have anybody online or on the phone?
Chair Park, we do not have anybody online.
Okay, well then we're done with public comment. Then let's go on to Planning Commissioner informational reports. Do any of my fellow commissioners want to report on anything in their district or otherwise? It looks like no. Then how about our minutes? And we'd be considering the minutes of July 12, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to review those and study them? Commissioner Cooney?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did review the minutes. They're limited and excellent, and I would move approval.
Okay. And Commissioner Bradley, did you have a comment too? Or did he beat you to the punch?
No, I saw nothing to change either, so I'll second the motion.
Okay, I just saw that your light was on. Okay, second the motion, great. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Then let's go on to the director's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
Have you recovered yet?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I just wonder if you recovered from your vacation yet.
I don't think so.
Okay, good, good. That's a good vacation then.
This Rambo tour of France. So I have a brief report for you this morning. I wanted to alert all the commissioners to the annual Planning Commissioners Association meeting that is going to be happening this year in Tuolumne County. It is in October, on the 6th and 7th of October. David Villalobos is going to be sending an email around to you to provide you information about it. It's an opportunity to meet other commissioners from around the state, and they'll have some interesting topics that they'll be discussing, and that'll all be outlined in the email. So if you have an interest, let us know. And you know, sometimes you can squeeze those things in, sometimes you can't, but it's probably something that will be of benefit to commissioners if they have the time.
And is there P&D funding for us to attend?
Do you guys hear that echo?
We do.
Not sure where that's coming from, but I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Chair?
It's hardly worth repeating. I just asked if there was P&D funding for commissioners to attend this conference.
You know what, I'll have to look into that.
Oh my God, there might be. That'd be great.
I'll
I
have to
doubt
look
it.
into it.
That's right.
I'm not making any promises.
No, I-
And then with respect to the housing element, we have been working very hard in responding to the comments that we received from the state. I think we're quite fortunate in that our comment letter was really rather short. I think it was about 4.5 pages of comments, which is one of the shortest letters that you see around the state. So I want to just say a shout out to my housing team for the department. They've done an amazing amount of work, and so we've been meeting with the state to respond to their comments. We think we'll have something to resubmit to them next week. They have another 60 days to review it. Whether they need 60 days or not is uncertain, depending on their workload. So, and the response that we get from them on this second submittal will dictate when we can start to go to hearings. Some jurisdictions were going ahead with adoption before state HCD had given them the green light that they were in, for the most part, in conformance with state law. And the states subsequent to that came out and said, do not do that. Do not adopt your housing element without us letting you know that we think you're substantially compliant with state law. So we are going to wait for that green light before we start hearings. So we are hoping that we could start hearings early fall, but I will definitely keep you posted on what we learn from the state. The program EIR is underway, and you will see that be released for public comment, and that's covering the rezones, which are a separate step also, and that should be released in the fall as well for public review. And then in terms of board actions that have happened, I don't know if you got a report last week, but I was not here, so I don't know if Jeff offered any information about that. But I will let you know that on the 11th of July, the board acted on the safety element that you had heard with the fire safe components. And so that has been adopted. And then they also heard the Coral Casino appeal, which came through the Montecito Planning Commission. In terms of future board actions, we have the Exxon valve replacement appeal that's going to the board when they return from their summer break on August 22nd. We have something called the Garrity Garage appeal that'll be heard on the 22nd of August. And then we have the Coastal Resource Mitigation Fund hearing, and that will be on August 29th. So those upcoming items, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Briley?
Thank you, Director Plowman. On the housing element, so congratulations on the short letter. I had a long conversation with Elise Dale before I met with some constituents in the 2nd District, and she was really helpful. She also said that the HCD manager came and met with staff, and she was very elated that he would take that time. In terms of this process, the programmatic EIR, do you think will be available for public review before we know the housing element dates for our hearing? And how many? No, is it all coming bundled in one thing?
No. We are going to still keep the rezones and the housing element adoption separate. So I'm hoping we'll be at a hearing with the housing element, adoption of the actual housing element, not the rezones, in fall. It's possible that the EIR would be coming out around the same time, but if we come, and this is getting kind of technical with respect to CEQA, but we will come for an adoption as quickly as we possibly can. And we will likely use a CEQA exemption for the actual adoption of the housing element. And then the EIR will be covering primarily the rezones. We will do some analysis of the programs and the adoption just for backup, but our goal is to get adoption happening as quickly as possible, because that is what will bring us into compliance with state law, and that will alleviate the restrictions that were placed on the county because we missed the state mandated deadline.
That's very interesting. That's the first time that I really understood the distinction in the CEQA. So is notice of exemption how a lot of other agencies are doing their HEU updates?
City of Goleta did. Carpinteria did.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so they are using them for that. I mean, really all the impacts associated with our housing element rest with the rezones.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have a time certain, and so fall for the HEU update for our, and we're still thinking maybe just one hearing at Planning Commission. That's
our
like what
goal.
Okay,
For adoption, that's our goal. Yeah,
okay. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
And,
Any other questions?
Commissioner Cooney?
I have a question. Welcome back,
Thank you.
Ms. Plowman. I had about 7 calls into you, none of which have been presented to you because I said, forget it. She won't, she doesn't need to ask them anymore. What I wondered about the housing element comments, your staff is working right now diligently to get those back. Are those going to be public at the time that they're submitted back to HCD?
They will be. We are required to post them on the website for 7 days before we actually submit them to the state.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to add to your comments. We had some discussion of, when we talked about the projection report of the workshop on August 30 on the recreational master plan and policies and, of course, ordinance changes that relate to that. But I want to advise planning commissioners that some of that will intersect in some ways with the housing element, and that in working on the workshop, I've been privy to some work that P&D has been doing along with Parks, and there's some pretty exciting developments there on how the work we're doing on recreation can support the housing element, not interfere with it, but support it, and in ways that make the rezones that people are so concerned about look like it's a tremendous opportunity for recreational development in this county. So there's some really great things going on, and you'll hear about those on the 30th, and it'll touch on the housing element.
Mr. Chair, thank you for bringing that up. And we do have a policy in our housing element that is related to recreation and wanting to make sure that new housing projects are in alignment with a rec master plan, and wanting to create some incentives for people to include beneficial recreational aspects into their projects. Most projects do include some because that's how they can compete in the market. Having the more amenities they have, the better. But we're going to take a step beyond that. So I appreciate you raising that, Mr. Chair.
And I think it's also kind of a happy coincidence that we'll be considering the environmental justice element on the 13th of September. And I'm not always sure what goes in what element, but it seems to me that when we're talking about recreation in housing, especially affordable housing, that it certainly serves the purposes of environmental justice to have recreation for folks that otherwise are underprivileged.
Yes. Yep. Any other questions from the commission? All right, thank you. Good to see you all.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go on to our standard agenda. And Ms. Castro, would you read in our one and only item we have today.
The following is the hearing on the request of Jill Sestino, representative of Concerned Carpentarians, to consider case number 23 APL 00008, an appeal of the Planning and Development Department P&D Director's approval, case number 19 CDP 000045. Licensing and to accept the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program Environmental Impact Report 17 EIR 0003 as adequate environmental review.
Okay. Now, do any of my fellow commissioners have ex parte contacts to report? Commissioner Cooney, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. I had a meeting yesterday with the appellant, Ms. Stinos, and with Ana Carrillo, both at the same time in my office. And then later in the day, I visited the site, and Mr. Eric Edwards showed me the greenhouse and surrounding area, as well as another member of his staff. It was a very informative visit that I'm anxious to share with my fellow commissioners as we take the project up.
Okay. And Commissioner Bradley?
I had a Zoom meeting actually with Ms. Tessinos and Ana Carrillo yesterday, and that was all.
Okay. I had a phone conversation with Ms. Tessinos about the format of the hearing and hearing times and so forth. Otherwise, no other contacts. Okay, well, let's go ahead with the staff report.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Kevin De Los Santos, and I'm presenting the appeal of the proposed 4994 Foothill Road Cannabis Nursery Cultivation Project. The project site is located at 4994 Foothill Road within Area B of the Carp Ag Overlay District. The project site is zoned Ag 1 and located within the coastal zone. As shown on the screen, portions of the project site are adjacent to Carpinteria High School. Franklin Trail is shown in white, Franklin Creek is shown in blue, and the city limits of Carpinteria are shown in purple. The existing parcel is 17.95 acres in size, and the project site is currently developed with approximately 9 acres of greenhouses, a 16,000 square foot plant storage warehouse, a single-family dwelling, an ADU, and a detached garage. The majority of the existing greenhouses currently grow non-cannabis orchids. As stated before, the project site is located near Carpinteria High School and is subject to a 600-foot setback for nursery cultivation. The perimeter of the high school is shown in purple, and the orange arrow and orange round line depict the 600-foot sensitive receptor setback for nursery cultivation. The project site is currently cultivating cannabis nursery plants under state provisional licenses. This area is shown in green. The proposed cannabis nursery cultivation will occur within the same area that they are currently cultivating in. The proposed project is a request to allow approximately 2.66 acres of cannabis nursery cultivation within 4 existing permitted greenhouses. No mature plant cultivation or post-harvest processing of cannabis will occur on site. No new development or redevelopment of greenhouses is proposed. Approximately 22,000 square feet of as-built greenhouses will be removed. A retention basin will be constructed in place of the demo greenhouses. This basin is shown as a blue circle on the screen. Tenant improvements include a new restroom and repair and maintenance to the greenhouses. The cannabis operation will utilize a maximum of 8 year-round employees, and the project will utilize a buyer's vapor phase odor abatement system. An enlarged floor plan is shown here. The proposed nursery cultivation will occur within the pink shaded areas of the existing greenhouses. Again, there will be no mature plant cultivation. The 600-foot sensitive receptor setback from Carpinteria High School is depicted as a black dashed line here within greenhouse B4. The applicant has installed a floor-to-ceiling wall in greenhouse B4, separating the cannabis operation from a non-cannabis orchid operation. This wall is shown here as a dark red line. The applicant will also install a 6-foot tall security fence within greenhouse B4. The proposed fence is depicted here in blue near the existing wall. The security fence is a requirement by sheriff to comply with their security standards. The applicant is also proposing to demarcate the 600-foot setback line with paint and signs to notify employees that no cannabis is allowed beyond that setback. The appellant has raised 4 appeal issues. The appellant contends that the OAP is not utilizing best available odor control technology. The appellant contends that a vapor phase odor abatement system is not adequate and that regenerative carbon scrubbers be utilized due to the operation's close proximity to Carpinteria High School. Staff has reviewed the OAP and it is consistent with all requirements of Article 2, including certification by an industrial hygienist. The applicant is proposing a vapor phase system consistent with the cannabis section requirements of Article 2. The OAP goes further to incorporate a tiered response to odor complaints and adaptive management that requires recertification of the OAP and deployment of additional or alternative odor control technology in the event that P&D determines that the proposed system fails to effectively prevent odors from being experienced in residential zones. Additionally, the applicant is proposing only nursery cultivation. According to the OAP, nursery cultivation produces no significant cannabis-related odors. The second appeal issue is the assertion that the project must install a permanent wall between the cannabis nursery cultivation area and the 600-foot sensitive receptor setback. The proposed project meets all the regulations for cannabis projects pursuant to Article 2. There is no requirement to install a floor-to-ceiling wall separating cannabis areas from sensitive receptor setbacks. However, the applicant has installed a floor-to-ceiling wall that separates the cannabis nursery area from non-cannabis areas. Staff was made aware of the floor-to-ceiling wall after final docketing of the staff report. The third appeal issue is the assertion that the project will impact air quality and health due to vapor phase system, terpenes, and the creation of ground level ozone. The appellant did not provide any substantial evidence identifying potential health risks of the vapor phase formula or cannabis odors. As we have discussed in previous related hearings, County APCD has reviewed the vapor phase formula and confirmed that it does not contain any toxic air contaminants. Additionally, cannabis does not produce significant amount of biogenic VOCs or ozone, and the proposed project is within the scope of the cannabis programmatic EIR, which identified cannabis emissions as a significant and unavoidable impact. The final appeal issue is the assertion that there has not been adequate enforcement by the county of cannabis projects and that requiring neighbors to complain is not a satisfactory system. The project does meet all the requirements in Article 2 for cannabis projects, and there will be adequate enforcement by the county to ensure the project complies with all applicable requirements. The project is subject to conditions of approval, which require permit compliance monitoring by P&D staff, and any violations of permit conditions on the subject property will be subject to enforcement actions by the county. As discussed in the staff report, the proposed project is consistent with all applicable policies and development standards of the Coastal Zoning Ordinance, Comprehensive Plan, and Coastal Land Use Plan. The OAP meets the requirements of Article 2, and the permit application was processed accordingly. The project is within the scope covered by the PIR for the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program. Staff recommends that your commission take the following actions: deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval as specified in Attachment A, determine that the previously certified programmatic EIR is adequate, and approve the project, subject to the conditions included as Attachment B. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions for staff? Commissioner Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. DeSantos. So this wall that was added to your photograph, that was really helpful. Does that go all the way to I wasn't able to have interior access to this site, or I didn't reach out for that. Does that go all the way to the top of the structure that is angled?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as shown on the screen, yes, the wall does go from wall to wall within the greenhouse. It does not follow the exact delineation of the 600-foot sensitive receptor setback, but it does go from wall to wall.
Yeah, I meant vertically.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yes, it does go vertically all the way to the roof.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and so what is what happens in that space between the wall and the pink line that's the 600-foot? Well, that, or also, what is the dark pink line around the greenhouse areas on your slide 5? So there's a space between, right to the left of the dark pink line outlining the greenhouse areas and to the left of the 600-foot setback. What's that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that space in between the pink line, the proposed fence, and the existing floor-to-ceiling wall will remain empty. They are not proposing any development or plants within that area.
So the 600-foot setback area is really, how is that established in the structure?
The applicant will demarcate that 600-foot sensitive receptor setback with paint and hang signs to notify employees.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have some questions. I understand from your presentation that the proposed operation will be in the same place where there's a provisional operation right now, correct?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that is correct.
Now, the proposed operation is nursery only. The existing operation, or past, or whatever the right word is it been nursery only, or is it mature plants?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, to my understanding, right now, under state provisional licenses, they are only growing nursery cultivation. In the past, when they first obtained those licenses, I do believe they grew mature plants as well.
So do you know how long it's been since they've had mature plants in that operation?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I would have to defer to the applicant team to provide accurate information on that question.
Okay. And have we had any history of complaints about that particular operation and odor?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, no, we have not received any specific directed complaints against the address. However, we have received general area complaints for the area of Foothill Road near Carpentry High School, but none directly against the address.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you about something that I should know by heart, but it's complicated enough it always confuses me. You know, we've had an addition to the cannabis ordinance requiring CUPs, at least on some of these projects. And I don't know how that works with these Carpinteria projects, because I'm looking through the findings, and I typically look for finding 2.1.5 for CUPs about neighborhood compatibility, and I don't see that here. So what's different about this project than other projects, and how, with respect to that finding?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the neighborhood compatibility finding for conditional use permits, I'm not sure that finding specifically applies here, although the proposed operation is within existing greenhouses, which is compatible with other Ag 1 zone properties within the area. And there are properties directly to the northwest and east that utilize existing greenhouses.
And if I can chime in too, so the CUP requirement that I think you're thinking of is only in the inland area.
Only
Does not
in-
apply in the coastal zone. Doesn't apply to this project. This is a coastal development permit.
Right. And then in some of the coastal projects, I suppose when we have development plans, I don't know, we have a similar finding.
Sure. Yep.
But since we don't have a development plan here, we don't have it here. If we did, we'd have that.
Correct. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'll bet somebody else was confused, but they
Well,
weren't.
you know what?
All right.
I'm going to
Commissioner
demonstrate my
Bradley.
confusion, and you prompted it. Thank you. So remind me, what is the threshold for a development plan then in the coastal zone?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I think we'd have to look into that to provide accurate information, but depending on the zone and site, it's dependent upon development that exceeds a certain threshold, usually around 15,000 square feet.
It's size-based, right? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. De Santos, I was in the greenhouse, subject greenhouse yesterday, and there are nursery plants throughout. However, I was also shown an area described to me as mother plants that were different from the general nursery plants. Are you aware of those different plants? Was that described to you at any point?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, yes, that has been described in the proposed odor abatement plan. To my understanding, the mother plants are still considered part of the nursery proposal or nursery plant, and they do not produce flower or are considered mature plants.
Yeah, I understood from the staff report that that they're not odor producing because of actions taken by the operators, and I guess probably the best explanation of what they do to prevent the flowering is from the applicants. But I just wanted to be sure that the public wasn't getting the impression there are only growing nursery plants. There are some in this hybrid area.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Then let's move on to the presentation by the appellant. And what I've suggested to our appellant, who's not a professional planner or attorney that's used to doing these presentations, is that we'll have a cap of 30 minutes for both the opening statement and the rebuttal, but try not to take it because that'll just bore everybody. You don't need to, but it's there. And then so for applicants, you'd have the same thing if you need it, but you don't. There you go. Okay, so how do we see the PowerPoint? How do we see Ms. DeCinos? Or do we not?
Well, I'm on the side view. I can see myself.
Okay.
And thank you for that clarification. I timed myself about 5 times last night, and each time I came out under 15 minutes for my presentation. So please let me know if I'm talking too fast. Okay?
You did this 5 times? You must have driven everybody crazy in your house. There you go. All right. Well, give it a crack.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Park and commissioners. My name is Jill Stasinos, and I have lived for more than 32 years, approximately 1.5 miles from Carpinteria High School. I've been a teacher of special needs students both in the Carpinteria and Santa Barbara Unified School Districts. Having been a special education teacher for approximately 35 years, I know from firsthand experience the importance of a good learning environment. It is very difficult to teach students and for students to learn with outside distractions such as malodors. That is why I'm here this morning representing concerned Carpinterians in their appeal of the Medi Edibles Incorporated project located at 4994 Foothill Road. Next, slide 2. Thank you. We are concerned about this cannabis project's odor abatement plan, including vapor phase ingredients such as EcoSorb and/or Benzico. Both EcoSorb and Benzico are not currently considered the best available control technology and do not sufficiently mask the cannabis odor. Even though only nursery cannabis plants will be grown in the greenhouses, there is still some nuisance smell from cloned and vegetative cannabis plants grown during the latter part of the 3 to 9 weeks before the plants are transported off-site. 2 of the 4 greenhouses are located within 750 feet of the Carpinteria High School property line. As far as we know, Greenhouse 4 will only have paint and a sign to separate the 5,970 square foot portion for cannabis activities. All 4 of the greenhouses abut the popular Franklin hiking trail. Next slide. 3. Thank you. Currently, there are 5 cannabis operations located in close proximity to Carpinteria High School. The Planning Commission added the condition that regenerative carbon scrubbers be installed within 12 months as a condition for approval of the cannabis project located at 4532 Foothill Road. 4701 and 4555 Foothill Road have already installed regenerative carbon scrubbers, and 4505 Foothill Road is being heard on appeal in September to add this same condition. Next slide, 4. It is important to have the same standards for all of the greenhouses, especially those within 1,000 feet of Carpinteria High School. Though this odor abatement plan was written on December 8th of 2022, it is not correct in that it claims the vapor phase system is the best available control technology now. On page 7 of the OAP, it is not correct to say that regenerative carbon scrubber technology is still in its infancy and not yet commercially available. The OAP uses a May 2018 presentation as its basis, and since then the best available odor control technology has changed. Presently, the best available odor control technology is regenerative carbon scrubbers. The operator for Medi Edibles Incorporated has voluntarily offered to use regenerative carbon scrubbers in his 3 cannabis nursery greenhouses located at 3450 Via Real. Next slide, please. The use of Bayer's EcoSorb and/or Benzico vapor phase systems are not adequate and emit other chemicals into the air which have caused many residents to experience health concerns. In November of 2022, a study completed by SCS engineers demonstrated the effectiveness of regenerative carbon scrubbers at controlling odor in a vented Carpinteria greenhouse. This study demonstrated the superiority of regenerative carbon scrubbers, which filter odorous constituents inside the greenhouses as compared to vapor phase systems that rely on chemical reactions occurring outside the greenhouses after the odors have already escaped. Also, vapor phase odor control systems result in a new increase in total emissions as compared to regenerative carbon scrubbers that reduce the total emissions going into the atmosphere. Next slide, please. Currently, there is too much EcoSorb 100, 107, and now Benzico being pumped into the atmosphere, which affects residents and local air quality. The daily recommended amount of EcoSorb is 3 to 7 gallons per day, which is equal to 4.07 to 9.49 tons of EcoSorb put into the air by one operator in 1 year. Currently, there are approximately 12 cannabis sites using EcoSorb and/or Benzico, which is equivalent to an additional 48.84 to 113.86 tons of EcoSorb added annually to our air. Since this additive is being pumped out of cannabis greenhouse vents 24/7, there is concern that it takes more than a month for the first application of EcoSorb to degrade. Benzico is the product being used by the same operator at 5980 Casitas Pass Road, where many nearby residences and business have complained about the intolerable cannabis smell. This cannabis operator is using the same primary odor contact person phone number for 4994 Foothill Road as 5980 Casitas Pass Road, and nearby residents have reported that this contact hasn't led to any odor improvement. Next slide. Cannabis farms near high schools present several risks and drawbacks, including increased exposure to illegal drugs and a perception of acceptance of a local drug culture. The 2022 Santa Barbara Grand Jury report noted that both the Planning Commission and the Superintendent of Carpinteria School District had requested a distance of 1,000 feet from the property line of the cannabis sites to the high school's property lines. Because Carpinteria High School is located within 1,000 feet of the cannabis greenhouses, it is very important to protect the students and faculty from the cannabis odor and/or the use of a neutralizing masking agent. It is imperative that the county prevent odors from being experienced at sensitive receptors like schools, the same as it is supposed to do in residential zones. Next slide, please. Greenhouse 1 is the brown area behind the trees with no roofs. Nothing is currently being grown in Greenhouse 1. Since Greenhouse 1 will need to be repaired, the owner will need to install new odor abatement system. So it makes sense to install regenerative carbon scrubbers at this time. Next slide, please. This slide shows the layout of the cannabis project at 4994 Foothill Road. The greenhouses are labeled in red, and the circle in red indicates the area where the water retention basin is to be built. Most of Greenhouse 3 is closer than 750 feet of Carpinteria High School's property line, and the majority of Greenhouse 4 is within 600 feet of the high school's property line. However, a portion of Greenhouse 4 is allowed to have cannabis nursery operations on it. Next slide, please. The two dotted lines show where the 600-foot and 700-foot distance is from the high school's property line. The four dotted areas with the label clones are where the clone plants will be for 3 to 4 weeks. We believe the mother plants and the vegetative plants will be grown in the pink areas. However, we don't know where the vegetative plants for 4 to 5 weeks will be grown due to the original odor abatement plan's recent update. The blue line is the proposed chain link fence. According to the planner, there is now a permanent floor-to-ceiling wall surrounding two sides in Greenhouse 4, which separate the cannabis activities from the non-cannabis activities. But yeah, now we know that that's not shown, and the reason it's not shown is because it will continue to say paint on the floor. There will be paint on the floor and signs to separate the cannabis from the non-cannabis allowed areas. So there is no wall except for the permanent red one that is outside, actually, yeah, that you can see in the slide. Next slide, please. Actually, can you back up 1 second to that last slide? Because we're proposing putting a permanent floor-to-ceiling wall where the interior bright pink lines are located to separate the portion of Greenhouse 4 where cannabis can be grown from the area in white where it cannot be grown. Next slide, please. Franklin Trail is outlined in white on this aerial view map of the project site. Note the straight part of this trail is next to this project site. On Saturday, July 15th, around 10 a.m., while hiking on the Franklin Trail, I noticed a strange, strong smell next to this cannabis project. Next slide, please. This photo of the greenhouses was taken during my Saturday, July 15th hike on the Franklin Trail. Approximately 20 other hikers walked past me in about an hour on this popular trail. No hiker should have to encounter either cannabis smell or the vapors occurring from the neutralizing masking agents being used. Next slide. Enforcement is an ongoing concern, especially in regards to making sure that the separate portion of Greenhouse 4, where cannabis can be grown, from the area where it cannot be grown, is maintained. Despite the hiring of Geosyntec to help with odor problems, greenhouse odor complaints from residential zones have not prevented cannabis operators from getting their business licenses renewed. It is important to have the best possible odor abatement plan in place to protect the students and staff at Carpinteria High School. The Planning Commission needs to be consistent in having all cannabis growers install regenerative carbon scrubbers, which currently is the best available odor control technology. Relying on old research from 2018 does not provide necessary data for the best available odor control technology. Tristan Strauss, the CEO of Medi Edibles Incorporated, signed a collaboratively developed agreement between Carpinteria growers and the Santa Barbara Coalition for Responsible Cannabis to observe a set of community odor guidelines to use the best available odor control technology. At this time, the best available odor control technology is regenerative carbon scrubbers. However, it appears that Mr. Strauss is reneging on his agreement. It is our hope that all cannabis growers in Carpinteria will eventually use the best available odor control technology. Next slide, please. Okay, in August of 2021, you can see Tristan Strauss, CEO of Medi Edibles Incorporated, signed the agreement between the Carpinteria growers and the Santa Barbara Coalition to provide the best available odor control technology. And I just showed a picture of the contract next to it. This is just the first page of the contract between the growers and the coalition. Next slide, please. Additionally, the agreement between the carp growers and the Santa Barbara Coalition states each grower shall, and I quote here from the contract, they shall promptly update their OAPs to include and implement such new best available odor control technologies. We request that the Planning Commission add the condition to this project's CDP for the odor abatement plan at 4994 Foothill Road that the applicant install regenerative carbon scrubbers within 12 months. We believe this is a reasonable request due to the fact that the Planning Commission has added this condition to the last 3 appeals when the applicants hadn't already changed their OAPs prior to their hearings before the Commission. If the 2 floor-to-ceiling walls and greenhouse 4 separating the cannabis area from the non-cannabis area have already been built, and they haven't, then the plan needed to be updated, but that's not the case. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Do any of the commissioners have questions of Ms. Stasinos at this point? And you'll have another time to talk at the rebuttal session. No? Okay. Then let's go on to the applicant's presentation.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Eric Edwards, and I am the Director of Compliance for MediEdibles, Inc. The project is in a cannabis nursery located in Carpinteria. We can go on to the next slide. My presentation should be short. Per the staff report, well, to answer Commissioner Park's question.
Staff, can you pull up? There you go.
To go back a little bit to answer Commissioner Park's question earlier, originally when the project application was submitted before our team's involvement, there was mature mixed light cultivation proposed, and there was mixed light mature plant cultivation being grown in the facility. At the time that we became involved in the project, approximately 2 years ago, give or take a few months, we shut down all mixed light cultivation, and we converted the entirety of the facility, the existing facility, to a nursery-only operation. This is in large part due to its location and our understanding of the sensitivity of this location and wanting to be good members of the community, as we are with all of our other projects. This project, as stated, is nursery only, as confirmed by not only our industrial hygienist, but the county's odor experts, Geosyntec. The facility produces no cannabis-related odors. County staff that has walked through the facility can confirm this as well. If there are odors being experienced nearby, it is not from this facility. This facility has never received an odor complaint in its history. It is located pretty far from the highway, back deep into the property. But nevertheless, the facility is nursery only, and immature cannabis plants do not create cannabis odor. There was some discussion regarding the difference between mother plants and sort of clones and cuttings. Mother plants are kept in an immature state for the purposes of taking cuttings. They are kept in an immature state via using light deprivation techniques. So pulling the blackout shades prevent light from hitting the plants and therefore triggering the flowering of the plants, depending on the time of year. So none of the plants flower. In fact, it would be extremely problematic if they were to flower, because that could have other repercussions for other genetics that we have inside the facility. A big part of cannabis nursery operations is controlling what's called hops latent viroid. It's a virus that affects cannabis plants and other types of plants. We spent the last several years getting rid of the virus and ensuring that our facility produces clean genetics for sale to other operators. And we are extremely mindful of who goes where at the facility in order to prevent the spread of this virus. So in short, all we do from an operational perspective is grow the mother plants, which look they're taller. They are big, bushy plants, but they do not produce cannabis odor. They're just like any other sort of nursery flower. And in fact, if you go from our operation into the neighboring cut flower operation, there is no discernible difference in odor or anything. It smells as a vegetation, but just like any nursery, any cultivation, you would have, plant odors. So there is no cannabis odor from this, and I just want to stress that even more. The idea of switching to an expensive new technology, that in fairness, these reports have come out since this project's approval. This project has been in the works for a number of years now, and originally, again, it was submitted with the intent of flowering, but with the intent of mature plant cultivation. But in light of everything that we've dealt with, our agreements with carp growers and the coalition, which was cited in the appellant's presentation, we switched gears, and we have done that for a while, and that is essentially the concession made to be good neighbors, to be good stewards of the community, and to not produce cannabis flower right next to the high school. We knew that would be a very bad approach, and so again, as soon as we had any involvement with the project, that's the decision we made. In addition, the facility is separated with a floor-to-ceiling wall. It'll have additional fencing installed to prevent, from the sheriff's perspective, to prevent anybody from breaking through the greenhouse and getting to the nursery. The reason why that area back there is such a small portion of the greenhouse, and why we actually need that portion, is we keep effectively what we call our grandmother room, and it's just our clean genetics that we use to make mother plants from. Again, it all has to do with this virus and preventing virus from spreading throughout the greenhouse. So that small portion in the back there is used solely for that purpose. So it's a very small subset of the mother plants needed to clone and to propagate plants for our overall operation. So there is a floor-to-ceiling wall that's been present. It's been present since we took over the operation. It's been there for a long time, so I'm not quite sure why there was confusion there. But it's been operating this way for a number of years, and there's never been any plants in that area that we've operated. We can continue on to the next slide. And again, you guys have seen it again. It shows the two setback lines from the school and the existing facility. And we can go to the next slide. This is straight from the Geosyntec report on odor from the facility. They walked the facility, I can't quite remember the date, I want to say maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Confirming that the current system is effective, which is a little bit of a misnomer. There is no odor to abate, and so any system would effectively be effective. And so from an operator's perspective, this is a system that was installed early on before our involvement in the project when it was flowering. This was voluntarily installed by the former operators to reduce overall odor in the community. And the system is active and working today presently, even though, again, the facility produces no cannabis odor. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so bottom line, no odor. There is a floor-to-ceiling wall. We are revitalizing and making productive use of dilapidated greenhouses. The vast majority of this parcel is not being utilized to its fullest extent, and Again, we are an existing greenhouse. The operation isn't going to change from its current configuration, and there's been no complaints again lodged against this facility. In contrast to the appellate's claim, we are part of the Coalition Carp Growers Agreement, and we did amend this project, this OAP, per the Coalition Agreement. We incorporated the community guidelines into our project description. We incorporated the tiered response system, and we incorporated the carbon scrubbers should that be necessary, should the switch be necessary, if the current system is unable to control nuisance odors. Additionally, to alleviate concerns, one of the requirements was that we install additional landscaping along Franklin Trail to further shield the greenhouses. And so there will be additional avocado trees being installed probably along the place where those photographs were taken, and, along with additional irrigation to support those avocados. And that is all I have. I'm available for questions.
And does anyone have questions of Mr. Edwards? Mr. Cooney?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, welcome, Mr. Edwards. I'm sure this is a difficult process for you to go through. Yesterday you were at ease and very open and helpful to me in answering questions, but I thought for the benefit of my fellow commissioners and decision makers that we might cover a couple of the same things.
Please.
So, you know, I was surprised at your initial statement that there are no flowering plants in the greenhouse and therefore no odor. Is that something that you're bound to continue, or if one day a variety of flowering plants comes along that doesn't produce odor to the extent that some do, you would be restricted from putting that into this greenhouse?
Correct. So initially, as I said, the initial application was for mixed light cultivation, which would have prevented that use should we decide to in the future. And again, in these types of projects, it's always best to seek the sort of highest level of entitlement you can get. It increases the economic value of the entitlement, and so forth. Again, we made the conscious decision to pull that from our, I forget which submittal it was to the Planning and Development Department, but it was one of the multitude of our submittals, one of the more frequent ones. I believe there's been 5 or 6 for this project. But yes, we pulled mixed light cultivation, so this entitlement will only afford us a nursery license at the state level. If we were to flower here or want to flower here in the future, we would have to go through the entire process again by submitting a new CDP to obtain a cultivation license from the county. So at the state level, we'd be prohibited from renewing or reviving our the previous mixed light licenses that have expired long ago. And from the county CEO's office, we'd be prohibited from getting a cultivation business license. The only business license that will be afforded for this operation is a nursery business license.
Okay. In terms of the current status of any kind of odor prevention, I gather you already have the tubes in place to release Ecosorb or Benzico.
Correct, yes. And again, as I said, that was installed, I don't know the exact year, but before our involvement. So I want to say pre-2020. So it was likely installed sometime before that date. But yes, there is currently a buyer system with Ecosorb as the neutralizing agent.
So is it operating, in fact, at this time?
Yes. The odor machine is working and functional as confirmed by the Geosyntec. Occasionally, it's turned off for maintenance or for refueling, or if we run out of Ecosorb and somehow we didn't place an order. But But it is working. It is functional. Again, our goal would be to not use it. I mean, I understand the community's concern with releasing additional substances into the air, and so our goal would be to turn it off entirely, as it's unnecessary to abate odors because there are no cannabis odors at this facility, and so I think we landed here as one because it's already pre-existing and pre-installed, and no one really wants to spend additional resources to install different technology to abate something that isn't occurring. And that's primarily why this project didn't adopt the carbon scrubbers like we have done on all of our other projects. I mean, this project is unique in carpentry in that it is only nursery. And the community is used to us operators standing up here explaining how our odor abatement technologies will work and abate odors and the distances from sensitive receptors. All of that discussion, from our point of view, is moot in this context with no flowering plants.
What I'm trying to focus on is the apparent lack of any need to have these chemicals added to the atmosphere. In fact, the appellant made a point of saying, this is not a good system. And if you were flowering, we'd be talking to you about scrubbers, and you'd be saying how they'll work great. But this is unique, and I'm just throwing out for subsequent discussion that this method that's outdated, old, and largely ineffective, but also potentially harmful to certain recipients, including people using the high school football field, which is the part of the high school that's closest, as I could see, to the operation. Maybe we not only don't need it, but shouldn't have it. And, I think we need to hear more about that possibility. And if you have anything to say about it, other than, yeah, we don't want it either.
I mean, yeah, we would be happy to dismantle it, to take it down, to no longer purchase EcoSorb, to no longer use the electricity, the very limited electricity we have at the facility running the machine. We'd be happy to. The reason why it's in place and currently operating is because that's what we've committed to. That's what we've said we were going to do, and to abate, no pun intended, community concerns. I think a lot of the community members are misinformed in that this facility produces odor. The appellant said as much during her presentation, but it's simply not true. There is no odor. So if it's this commission's directive that we should turn it off or not use it or revise the OAP such that we don't need to use it, we would be absolutely happy to.
Yeah, I want to correct you about one statement there. I don't think the appellant said that she smelled this greenhouse or set of greenhouses as the source of an odor. She just said she was on the trail on the 15th of July and smelled what she thought was cannabis. And there are lots and lots of potential sources of that odor. I'm sure she smelled something from somewhere. But
yes, I don't doubt it. Yeah.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying we need to be accurate, about what we're saying she said. However, I don't think she has been asked or given an opinion, she might on rebuttal, as to whether she thinks it's worthwhile to continue with the remedy if there's no need for it. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else? I do. Commissioner Bradley.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And this is actually clearer probably in staff's presentation, but on the floor plan, we've got your 650-foot line that's going to be painted, and then you've got the, the pink area around the greenhouse grows.
Correct.
So what is that empty space between the floor-to-ceiling wall and the 650 feet going to be used for? I mean, why can we move the wall to be there? Or,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Honestly, it's just economics. As seen in the photograph presented, it's not used. We don't have plants growing there. There already is a wall separating the facility, so the idea of having to install another floor-to-ceiling wall in a facility that's already existing is redundant in our opinion and just expensive. As you guys are well aware, the cannabis industry is not doing its best, and we are not at we are not in a point in time where there's a lot of money to spend on revitalization. And I know folks don't want to hear that the cannabis industry is struggling, but that's the reality. It's evidenced by the reduction in taxes being received from the county. And so spending additional resources to move a wall for the sole purpose of I guess from our perspective, it would be like the county saying, we don't trust you, we don't believe you.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say that directly, but, this commission has really struggled with this stuff, and we've struggled with guarantees by staff that enforcement, and, now we've got geosyntic. I really appreciate, by the way, you including that in your presentation. So we've been asked to approve these cases based on a hope and a prayer that these enforcement measures are going to all improve, that the EcoSorb thing was going to work for a couple years, and now it's, regenerative carbon scrubbers. So I guess one question, and believe me, of all the commissioners, I don't really want to make you do extra stuff, but the question is, well, why was the wall built there? Then why didn't you just do it at the 650-foot line if you knew that's where it was?
Well, the wall was existing when we took over the operation. So that wall has been there for years, since before I ever stepped foot in those greenhouses. So one, it wasn't like we spent money to construct something that was purposefully, set back from the setback.
Okay.
It was just existing there. And that's how we ended up there. The facility, everyone that operates the facility is mindful, again, of this setback and of the concerns there. And I understand your concern with enforcement, and my guess is as to why it's probably not very easily to build a curved wall, sort of that like kind of runs directly along that line. To the point of whether we should build a wall that sort of zigzags like right up against the plant, up against the plant as it follows the pink line in staff's presentation. It is a question. Again, we'd prefer not to spend the additional resources building a brand new floor to ceiling wall that separates it. I think we would be absolutely willing to alter the fencing plan layout for the security fencing that is going to go in there per sheriff's request. And if it makes the commission happy and the community happy, we're happy to put the fence up there, because look, we're installing the fence anywhere. We're going to be spending resources to do that anyways.
Well, maybe that's a good compromise. And to look at this floor plan, I mean, it's a little bit curious, right? You've got a fence right next to a wall, and I know it's because you're basically meeting two different codes. So even that seems like a waste of resources. But
we've had to do that at a number of operations. Put actual chain link fence right inside the greenhouse walls, just to basically for sheriff's department.
Because if you just put like baffling and something on the chain link, it might actually have an odor mitigation element in it. That seems curious, but anyway, well, okay.
Hadn't thought of that.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
Any other questions from any other commissioners? Okay, Mr. Edwards, I've heard some reference to benzocaine, which of course is a different solvent or whatever you want to call it from EcoSorb. and the Bayer system does not use benzoco. Why are we talking about benzoco in this hearing?
So the Byers system is, Byers himself, Mark Byers, does not support the use of benzoco in his system, and will not service the machines or warranty them if the operators choose to use different neutralizing agents other than Ecosorb. But benzoco and other neutralizers, I'm sure, will work in the system. It's a question of dilution and concentrations of the neutralizing agent, and so we as operators, and given the challenging times, we've struggled to find economical ways of saving money, of complying with all the county codes, but to make our operations more efficient. Benzoco has the benefit of being substantially cheaper than Ecosorb, and it can potentially last longer depending on the dilution levels. And so this project, the most recent OAP was amended to include both neutralizers, so basically at the operator's discretion, whether the operator wanted to use Ecosorb or wanted to use benzoco. The reason why we limited it to those two is because, for our understanding, those are the only two that have been vetted by APCD and approved for use in the county. And so, since both of those agents are available and acceptable for use, we wanted a bit more flexibility. So the odor abatement plan was amended to include benzoco just to give us that flexibility. And that, I believe that's why it's being spoken about here. Or it was referenced to other projects that use benzoco.
But it's in the odor abatement plan as a
Correct.
possibility. I know from speaking to Mr. Byers at length, he has an extremely low opinion of benzoco and believes it's a completely different kind of product than Ecosorb. And I also can recall the testimony of Danielle Delarmy and the Han Delarmy folks that have the rose business next to Ceres, that the benzoco release is actually causing more problems to them than the cannabis odors, even though they don't appreciate the cannabis odors. Tricky thing about this case, of course, is that we're looking at a project that ostensibly has no odors, but then we do still have an obligation to make sure we have the best available control technology. And I'm trying to get my arms around that. So you're telling us, as a practical matter, there's no odor because it's nursery. And that's been my experience when I walk through greenhouses, is what I'm looking at. But I'm mindful, and I'm going to give you a warning. Here comes a rant from me, that our cannabis permits are infinite duration. Okay, they outlast the Great Pyramids, the giant sequoias, and I noticed that Hoover Dam had to get re-permitted, Kachuma Dam had to get re-permitted, Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant had to get re-permitted, and I can go on of these monstrous, large public developments that have to get re-permitted, but cannabis permits do not have to get re-permitted. So I'm just thinking, if sometime in the future, it might be 10,000 years from now, because this is a land use permit, which we have decided in our infinite wisdom is infinite, you might decide, you know, we got a better way to do nurseries, and we are going to use flowering plants somehow. And for some reason that no one's come up with yet, but you're going to have an infinite period of time to think about it, we might actually have the smelliest cannabis plants in the world out there in the nursery. And yet we've given you a permit that says no really meaningful odor abatement system. So I guess we all come down to our ordinance and finding that there's a best available control technology, really, no matter what you're using it for. Am I on the right track?
If I may. I guess first and foremost, while the land use entitlement does run with the land, the county has a dual licensing framework. And so our business license does not run with the land, and our business license is renewed annually. And under the county's ordinance, the business license is the mechanism that the county primarily uses for enforcement of violations or enforcement of changes to current cannabis operations. The ordinance requires best available control technologies for controlling the odors emanating from the specific facility. Now, best available control technology is sort of being misused. It is a term of art that is used by engineers, and saying one best available control technology is the de facto standard for every operation goes against the spirit of the ordinance in requiring an industrial hygienist to actually to vet these projects. And so my argument is that we could remove the buyer's system and effectively not have anything other than SOPs and closing doors and that kind of thing. And that would be the best available, technology to control nuisance odors from this site. Should this site change in the future via a new CDP, which would be required to cultivate, mature plant cultivation, then that would be a whole different question, and I was sure it would be subject to additional appeals and hearings where we would discuss this and we would install it. But again, that was the original goal of this project, and it was revised to take all of these issues essentially off the table, to not really be in this position. That was the goal of making this decision, is really so I wouldn't have to stand here and defend our project to you guys like I have in the past. And so I would say that from our perspective, the county's controls are adequate. We have Geosyntec coming out to the site multiple times per year, verifying all of these things. They were just out there verifying that there is no odor here. And so, as staff's presentation stated, we comply with the ordinance, not only in formality, but also in spirit, which is why, it is only nursery now. So I feel like the concessions we've made for this project are for the exact reasons that we're talking right now. And all types of land uses, to your argument, run with the land and go on forever, and priorities change and community desires change, yet those entitlements are running with the land, and for lack of a better word, no one bats an eye. We're here today because of the word cannabis in front of the nursery. But at the end of the day, it's just a nursery plant. It's just a nursery operation. All it does is make little tiny baby clones that get shipped out to other facilities. There is no odor. And so, again, it's somewhat of a red herring.
Well, I think you've done a good job of delineating the difference between business licenses and the land use permit. And it's kind of intriguing from our perspective, because with the land use permits, we were always advised by staff, we don't look at the people, we look at the project. And it's, and even in fact with your company, I think of Mr. Strauss, who I've run into several times, and I personally believe he's probably the most fastidious, careful grower out there in following those SOPs that are so important on how you load things in the doors, and I give you credit for that. But on the other hand, our land use permit process requires us to look at the OAP and see if it works. You can watch my eyes batting. You said no one bats an eye at these limitless permits we have here. So many other counties have 10-year permits for cannabis, or 5-year. We don't. I've proposed it. Strauss Wind Energy Project, which we looked at just a few weeks ago, has a 30-year permit, and it's millions, if not billions of dollars of investment. So why we're looking at limitless permits here? Well, that's just how the ordinance works. And we do have that duty to look at the OAP, and the OAP in our world, not the business license world, has to have best available control technology. That's part of the land use process, as I see it.
If I may, it has to have the best available control technologies to control the odor or to control the operation proposed under that permit. It doesn't have to control for things outside of the scope of that permit. I think you would agree that that would be reasonable to try to control for a myriad of other considerations out there that we have no idea about or have really no bearing on the nature of this permit. Again, the permit is for nursery. Nursery is specifically defined under the county code and under the state code. And if the argument is, well, the code could change, I mean, again, I think that's applicable to every single permit that you guys have in front of you. And again, priorities change. So to your point, I think it is important for you guys to look at the OAP. But from our perspective, that would be to tell us, hey, we don't want you to use the buyer system because we feel that the negatives associated with releasing, the neutralizing agent into the atmosphere outweigh the benefits that we receive because there is no odor. And so I guess I agree with you. You should look at the best odor available, the best available odor technology for this specific project. And again, if it makes the community and the commission happy that to turn it off, we'd be happy to. But to increase the scope of the requirements for odor control to solve some future use that's not anticipated by this permit, that's not available to this permit, it's very likely, I've seen the ordinance change over the years since I've been doing this, and it's becoming not more restrictive, but more, I guess, more oversight. North County permits now require CUPs. What's to say that that's not the direction the county goes in? With the Carpinteria, the inland or the coastal zone. So I think you can make the argument sort of both ways. I think that, again, absolutely, it's your guys' duty to ensure that the best available odor control technology is installed for whatever specific operation is being proposed. And this project just doesn't merit additional odor control technology.
And your proposal is nursery plants is defined in the state law?
Correct.
And does that state law say that define nursery plants as immature plants that will never, ever, under any circumstances, generate odor? I don't think it does say that, does
Correct.
it?
No.
It just calls them nursery plants.
Correct.
Okay, well, I'm not here to argue with you. Let's go ahead. Has this generated any further questions from other commissioners? If not, let's take a break right now for 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
And you'll have rebuttal time, too.
Perfect.
That was just rehearsal. Okay. Good morning again. We're reconvening the Planning Commission hearing of July 26, 2023. And we're still on item number 1. We're at the public comment phase. I do not see anybody to make public comment up here in the hearing room. Do we have anyone online or by telephone? Mr. Villalobos.
We do have one speaker, Ana Carrillo.
Okay, let's go ahead with that. And Ms. Carrillo, you understand you have 3 minutes.
Perhaps Ms. Carrillo stepped away from her computer. I did send a note requesting that she unmute herself, but I haven't seen any response yet.
Okay, and that's the only public comment we have. Then, in the interest of moving this along.
Hello, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you are. Well, Ms. Carrillo, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I have to thank Kevin De Los Santos for sending me all the updated pictures. We still didn't have quite time to, analyze them. So I still have a question on that picture, the newest picture he sent with the pink for the wall. The wall is at the far side of 4, not the crooked wall. Is in dark pink, but that's not a wall, what I understand now. I thought there was a wall separating 3 and 4. So that's a question I have. And then I understand where the clones are going to be, but then where are the vegetative plants? Because I pointed out to Kevin that they needed to change something in the OAP, which they did. They modified, the OAP because it had talked about something else. So where they are for the last 4 to 5 weeks. And the reason we're pushing for this, the same standards that, you've been doing at the Planning Commission meetings is that in the OAP, and I'm reading this quote, notwithstanding the fact that immature and vegetative cannabis plants produce little to no odor, the operator has nevertheless maintained an odor abatement system. And in the same operator at 3450, the old Gallup and Stribling, has 3 nurseries that will be using the carbon scrubber technology. That was something that they voluntarily put in their OAP. And then the other point I wanted to make is that with benzocaine being used at 5980 Casitas Pass, there is supposed to be a tiered response that would be helping to correct the odor issue there, but it's not working. And the other thing is the business license, even though it says they look at the control, the odor complaints before they issue the renewal of the business license, that's not working either. So I just wanted to bring you up to, to date on that. So I guess so we would like at 4532 Foothill, next to the high school, the Planning Commission did ask to put a wall in, and they have put a wall separating the cannabis from the non-cannabis activities. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for your time and your efforts in helping to, and I will say I'm very thankful that this is now just a nursery operation as opposed to when they did have 5 provisional licenses and were growing mature plants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Creo. So that's all we have for public comment, am I correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, that Ms. Carrillo was the only public speaker.
Okay. Then let's go on to our rebuttal. Ms. DeCinos, do you have any rebuttal?
Yes, I do. Let me just start my video. Let's see. Okay.
And you have approximately 15 minutes left. I doubt that you'll need to take it.
No, I don't think so. You're correct. Okay, so my point one in rebuttal has to do with, unfortunately, the county doesn't have the staff to enforce the separation of cannabis nursery plants in the allowed area from the non-allowed area in Greenhouse 4. Thus, the rationale for our request to put in a floor-to-ceiling wall to separate the two areas. Also, a chain link fence separating the cannabis grow area from the no-grow area in Greenhouse 4 will be ineffective at preventing any odors from escaping Greenhouse 4. Since Greenhouse 1 has no roofs and must be repaired, this will necessitate the installation of an odor abatement system. So why not be proactive and install a regenerative carbon scrubbing system now? I'd like to reiterate that the operator for MediEdibles Incorporated, Tristan Strauss, has voluntarily offered to use regenerative carbon scrubber in his 3 cannabis nursery greenhouses located at 3450 Via Real. Okay, let's see. Okay, hold on. Got to go to, okay, sorry. Okay, again, I believe firmly that utilizing regenerative carbon scrubbers is an effective and responsible solution to mitigate the release of odorous compounds from MediEdibles Incorporated. These advanced scrubbers employ cutting-edge technology to remove and neutralize volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and other malodorous particles effectively. By implementing regenerative carbon scrubbers, 4994 Foothill Road, MediEdibles demonstrates its commitment to environmental stewardship and social responsibility. A couple of benefits that underscore the importance of adopting this technology is that regenerative scrubbers have proven to be highly efficient in eliminating odors, creating a more pleasant and neighbor-friendly atmosphere. And by reducing VOC emissions, regenerative carbon scrubbers contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases and overall air pollution, aligning this facility with broader climate change goals. I understand that implementing new technologies can be a significant investment. However, the long-term benefits far outweigh the initial costs. Also, I'd like to mention that I definitely, one of the reasons why no complaints at this particular project site have probably been because it's difficult to ascertain the exact location where the malodors emanate from. And I definitely smelled a strange odor on my recent Franklin Trail hike near this project's greenhouses. This smell was definitely different from, and it was not apparent as I hiked further up the Franklin Trail. So I'll just kind of sum it up with, I urge the commission to add the condition of implementing regenerative carbon scrubbers at 4994 Foothill Road as a crucial step in enhancing this cannabis production's facilities' odor control efforts. I definitely smelled something, and if there's a smell, again, to say exactly where it is located, it was somewhere near the greenhouses. I can't tell you exactly which greenhouse I smelled it from, but it was right there, right as I was on the Franklin Trail. I noticed it immediately. And again, further up, I didn't smell it. So there's some odors there. Maybe, it's not cannabis. Maybe it's from the Bayer system or for EcoSorb or Benzico. I don't know, but it was mal. It was a bad odor. All right. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edwards, you ready for some rebuttal? And you also have approximately 15 minutes left. I doubt that you need it, but you never know.
No.
And of course, questions and that doesn't take from your time. So
It's okay. I won't need it. Commissioners, Chair, thank you. I don't have a whole lot to say. In response to point one, that the chain link fence wouldn't be sufficient to control odors from the cannabis operation to the non-cannabis greenhouses. Just want to reiterate, there already is a floor-to-ceiling wall present. Also want to iterate that there are no odors And so the existing floor-to-ceiling wall would suffice. The chain link fence is supplemental security. Its intent is not to control odors. Its intent is to secure the facility from theft and those kinds of things. Again, to the point of the rehabilitation of some of the greenhouses and the expansion of the nursery into those greenhouses which are not currently used. The goal would be to not use the Byers system in general, but the goal would also not be to install expensive carbon scrubbers and the associated electrical permits and all of that other stuff related to it to control something that is just a non-issue for this site. And again, the OAP needs to be detailed toward the specific operation, not to some larger community standard or goal. I understand their concerns with spraying into the air, and that's why I've reiterated that we would be happy to turn it off. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
A question.
Yeah.
On the vapor phase system, are you required right now to have it on, or is it at your discretion?
It's I'm not 100% sure.
Okay,
It's been,
I'll get the answer from
Yeah.
staff. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions of Mr. Edwards? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
Then let's move on to whether staff has any comments or commissioners have questions of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I do have a few comments that we wanted to clarify. Wanted to reiterate that we haven't received any odor complaints on this site. There have been about 9 complaints generally along Foothill Road. Nothing for this site, though. And those 9 complaints, are complaints that referenced odor at Carp High School, but they did not cite this operation. I wanted to also clarify that the BACT, Best Available Control Technology, is site-specific. The county doesn't determine just one BACT. Vapor phase is an approved technology. EcoSorb and Bensico have been thoroughly reviewed by the Air Pollution Control District. The county did an inspection on April 21st at this site with Geosyntec. That's the consultant that we've retained for odor control inspections. And their report concluded that no on-site odor was detected. They walked through the whole site, through the greenhouses, and they also concluded that no off-site odor was detected. They walked along the western property boundary between the high school and the site. Per the standard odor abatement condition that's on this permit, the county will conduct at least 5 odor inspections, so 1 upon installation, which has been performed already. That was the April inspection, their first inspection, and 4 inspections quarterly thereafter. And during those inspections, the consultant documents the odor operator's compliance with the odor abatement plan and the effectiveness of the technology. Let's see, the last thing I want to clarify is that the greenhouses are existing and permitted with regard to the view from the trail, and a portion will be demolished to allow for construction of the new detention basin. And I think we wanted to clarify Commissioner Freeney's question about the operation of the vapor phase technology.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'm sorry, can you please repeat that question one more time?
Does this project's odor abatement plan require that the vapor phase system be running continuously, or is there other language where it's at their discretion?
We're going to look into that now, and we'll have an answer for you shortly.
Any other questions of Ms. Byler? Apparently, Commissioner Bradley, you do?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Baylor. when you said that there were going to be 5 inspections, where is that in the conditions of approval? Is that somewhere in the OAP or is that in a COA?
Great question. It is in the conditions of approval. So it's in the standard odor abatement plan, odor abatement implementation and monitoring condition. It's condition 19 on this permit. This is the standard condition that has been added to cannabis operations. It's under the monitoring component.
Okay, great. That helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Byler, I had a question about a comment you made that both EcoSorb and Benzico have been thoroughly vetted by APCD, their pollution control district, and approved by them, but they're looking to see if there's air pollution components from those products, right?
Correct.
So they're looking into public health from the release of those products. But they don't look to see whether the product is effective to remove cannabis odors, correct?
Correct. And to that point, that's that level of detail is something that our odor consultant would advise us on.
Right, but I could run this Sprite through APCD and they'd say, sure, it's okay. Or holy water. I mean, they're not looking whether it works. They're just looking whether it's going to cause worse problems. Okay.
Correct. So any changes to an odor technology or a vapor phase solution would be reviewed in consultation with our consultant.
Okay. Any other questions of staff at this point by commissioners? All right, we'll close the public hearing and let's move on to deliberations. Commissioner Cooney, it's your district. Would you like to go first or would you like the rest of us to go before you go? What's your choice?
I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners. I feel fortunate to have had an on-the-site view of the project because there is a discrepancy. There was a discrepancy in my mind after reviewing the staff report and the other supporting documents and what I saw on the ground. So to the extent I may be the only commissioner that saw it, I'd like to weigh in after hearing from everybody else.
And I see Commissioner Bradley, would you like to go first? Are your lights on?
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go. So I continue to have problems with this. I really appreciate Mr. Edwards' very thorough explanation of the decision and how you revised the project to be only nursery plants. And I double checked, it's in the project description. It's very tightly described so that I'm fairly confident that you can't sneak in flowering plants into these areas and therefore cause problems. Plus, as Ms. Baylor pointed out, then there's quarterly inspections on the odor abatement plan. And I also appreciate the fact that you don't want to have to build a second wall because you already got one in there. So I'm probably fine going with this as it is. I guess I feel like we should have regenerative carbon scrubbers somewhere in this. However, I am reminded myself to look at the odor abatement plan, and that is an iterative step that you would have to do if the current odor abatement measures are not functioning properly. Then that OAP ties you to putting in a carbon scrubber system as tier 3, I think it is, correct? So after reviewing all the material, again, I'm probably okay with the way it's written. Sorry to the appellants, but try it again. Okay, thank you.
Ready to go, Commissioner Freeney?
Sure, thank you. Well, I am interested to hear what Commissioner Cooney says, and I'll be more likely to vote along with him on this project. And I'm reminded again by Commissioner Bradley on the odor abatement plan, which I think this commission spent some time formulating along with staff, is it's a tiered or phased plan. So as problems occur and are reported, then more stringent options are needed to be put in place, which would be the carbon scrubbers. I think at this point you've got people afraid of the project that want the carbon scrubbers in. I understand that, but what we also learned in previous projects is they do require a lot of energy to run. So I can't see wasting that energy right now if there's no need for it. So overall, I'm in support of the project.
I'll go next. I think Commissioner Farini raises a good point about wasting energy or anything else relating to odor abatement. I'd point out that using the Bayer system, especially running it all day, uses a lot of energy. You're pumping a lot of stuff out in the air, you're processing it. It's, I know that the various growers do complain that it's an expensive system to operate and to maintain. Which brings me to a paradox. And the paradox is, if this was an outdoor project in the North County, and we've had those. We had one where the only neighbor was a Greca oil recovery site. I mean, like, who was going to complain about odor, right? And you know, I voted to have no odor abatement, not odor abatement plan, but odor abatement capital invested in the thing because it was a waste of money. And it's probable as a practical matter that any odor abatement for what you have now and intend to do, by you, I'm referring to the applicants, is a waste of money. I think, frankly, continuing to operate or maintain the Bayer system is a bigger waste of money and energy than a carbon scrubber would be, because the person that installed that system, Mark Byers, has testified that the gold standard from his point of view is scrubbers supplemented by the Bayer system, and he described that at great length in the first carbon scrubber project we had, which was the best illustrated one, the one that David and Cindy Van Wingerden have, where he does not have regenerative carbon scrubbers. He has carbon scrubbers of his own design that use filters, but it works the same way. And then when it does its release in the morning, then the Bayer system is there to back it up. So he would say, you know, why the system? And he would certainly say, don't run Benzico through it. And yet here we've got a project that's going to use a worthless system. Worthless not because there's something wrong with that system, but it's worthless for the problem that arises here when there isn't really a problem. And it's certainly using the potential for an emission project, which he would not approve of. But I look at this as a land use permit, and I don't want to tell anyone in the future, well, we said, yeah, go ahead with it, because everybody knows that there's not a problem with nurseries. We have a legal requirement to have an OAP. We have to look at what can be done under the life of this permit. And I think we have to use best available control technology that uses something that has some potential for being valuable, unlike what's there now, and that would be carbon scrubbers. And I've argued long and hard for conditions and worked with other commissioners to prepare conditions, and then we argue with county council, and then they get appealed, and sometimes the board approves the appeals, and sometimes it doesn't. And county council has to give very long confidential letters to the board as to what can be done or not. The simple thing is either you vote for it or don't. And I'm not going to vote for this project. I'm not going to support a project that is using something that we have long since passed. And that's where I am.
Sorry I asked to go last, because everybody has made sense in what they said and come to opposite conclusions. I really, well, I had a conversation with Mr. Edwards yesterday, and he at one point said, if it makes the community feel better to have a scrubber in there, we'll put a scrubber in there. And I thought about that overnight and thought, okay, is that just worthless in a nursery operation? And what I concluded after thinking about it is no, it's not. It establishes a method of controlling potential odors that could escape the greenhouses in one particular end of, I think it's greenhouse 4, with the mother plants, because they require the grower to take steps to prevent the flowering. And what would be ideal for the community, I believe, and the high school in particular, which we all agree needs protection, would be if, in the event, odors were created inadvertently because of mismanagement of the mother flowers, that is, the flowers that are supposedly cut off by depriving them of light, we would have a scrubber system in place ready to go to neutralize those odors. And it would be the technology that today is the best available. I would also, it would be my vote that the Bayer system that's in place now not be operated in the absence of odors. That the financial benefit to all from not running the system would be better placed in investing a single or at most 2 carbon scrubbers in greenhouse 4. So I would not follow staff's recommendation to approve it without at least 1 carbon scrubber strategically placed. Mr. Chair.
So I have a
Commissioner
question
Briley?
about that. I think that's a very good idea. And one question, and I don't know if this necessarily requires us to touch the conditions, but Ms. Baylor's citation of condition 19, which states, upon installation of the odor control system and quarterly thereafter for 1 year, permit compliance shall conduct an inspection of the odor control system to assess its compliance with the requirements of the condition and the approved odor abatement plan. 1 year isn't what I was thinking. And I know you've got, Geosyntec doing this stuff, but if we are going to ask for carbon scrubbers in there, and I would support that motion, I'm wondering if we can extend this inspection period, because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it sounds like there might be consensus not to continue the Bayer system operationally, and that makes complete sense, but to put in the regenerative carbon scrubbers. However, if there really is no odor after a couple of years, and maybe the scrubbers don't have to be turned on every day, and the nursery stays as just nursery, and there's no escaping odor from the mother plants, then that lets the applicant and operator know that they don't have to turn on the scrubbers every single day. I mean, I feel like we can get to the finish line on this with a little more protection than what is in the permit right now. So I'm just throwing that out there for more discussion, is to extend that compliance duration under condition 19. I'd suggest 3 years.
Commissioner Cooney?
Mr. Chair, since if the current position of the commissioners individually holds, we'd need to ask for findings for denial we can ask staff about that if that's our current position. I think we could get to a better solution with Geosyntec, for example, contributing to the operation of the scrubbers as opposed to the installation. But if they're not installed, as Commissioner Park pointed out, this goes on forever, and the life of these plants are being approved without scrubbers. We wouldn't be able to do it unless there was, severe odor problems, and I'd like to get ahead of that and have the scrubbers ready to go. So anyhow, I think this does require further input from staff, and so my motion would be to continue this matter for new findings and in effect to approve the project with 2 scrubbers placed in Greenhouse 4.
So if I understand you correctly, that would be an eventual motion after continuance for some period of time for staff to prepare different findings that we have now. And that the motion would essentially deny the appeal, approve the project, but subject to an additional condition that would require 2 scrubbers in that certain building in lieu of the current vapor control system, or vapor phase system. Am I restating it correctly?
That's correct. I would add that we should recognize that the other applicants who have had similar conditions regarding scrubbers were given time to install. And I think in this case, particularly given the state of the greenhouses collectively at this time is nursery, that we could give a 12-month period. It's reasonable for the installation and for the economics.
Well, I stated I would vote against the project, but if it's handled in the manner that you've described with that condition, then I would change my mind and I would support the motion. It sounds like there's enough commissioners that would do that. Do we have a suggested date from staff?
Chair Park?
Oh, Commissioner Freen?
Yeah, Commissioner Bradley brought up the extending the inspection period. I was curious if she still wanted that, or where we are with that.
May I add to that? Yeah, no, I think
Yes.
that's unnecessary now, because if we're going to start out with the carbon scrubbers, the inspection was only to confirm when they would need to be installed, the extended inspection time. So I'd say drop that. Thank you.
Well, we do know, sorry for jumping in, just to
Go ahead.
continue that thought, we do know that it might be a period of time, as long as a year before the scrubbers are in, the inspections that staff has indicated would occur over the next 4 quarters should go on. Because there's nothing better than a record that there is no odor now, there's no odor a year from now, and the scrubbers are for the unlikely event that odors develop in the future.
Sorry, I think this is a good discussion. I agree, however, the way the condition is worded, it's upon installation of the odor control system. So if the scrubbers are not put in for a year and we're suggesting that the buyer system becomes deactivated, then I'm not, well, what would be great is if you could inspect it and just see how it's doing on its own with no. Yeah. Does that make sense? If you can do inspections in the greenhouse for 2 years, once now to do a baseline almost, even though, and maybe it's only a couple inspections this year with no odor abatement system in place, right, Commissioner Cooney? And then next year after, or the second year after, the charcoal filters are in place. Does that make sense?
I'd be fine with that. The more inspections that staff can manage, I mean, they just did it in April, so maybe we have one more before the end of this year and then a second one a year later. These are suggestions for staff. You may have better ideas than we do today, and we'll welcome those, but the bottom line is we want to think this through and have these principles incorporated.
Did that address your concerns, Commissioner Freeman? Okay. Two things. One is part of my concept of there being a paradox is I think that we don't have a really well-proven connection between OAPs and equipment and actual cannabis odor and control of it. As our ideas, certainly speaking me personally, evolve as to what our role is and how to address this, I don't want that seem that I'm picking on this applicant. I think that I have trust and confidence in anyone in the cannabis world to handle these things with SOPs and proper attention to detail would be Mr. Edwards and Mr. Strauss. So I appreciate your continuous engagement in this process and then the fact that you're staying in the industry and trying to make it work. But a final point on the findings, I think we should try to avoid the reference to regenerative carbon scrubbers, and I think we've done that in our past conditions. There are different kinds of carbon scrubbers, and frankly, they're much more well-proven than regenerative carbon scrubbers are. So even though people like to use that word, because it sounds like the very most hip, cool thing, it's not necessarily something we should have in our conditions. That being said, what would you like us to select as a date for this continuance?
Chair Park, if I could,
Don't pick the 30th of
as
August.
the commission secretary, I'm trying to do my job here.
There you go.
Can I sort of summarize where I think we're at just for a second? So it's the intent of the commission to ask staff to come back with revised either project description or a condition that adds 2 scrubbers. Can you clarify, are you wanting them to remove the vapor system as part of the project at this point or not?
I'd like the vapor system to be inoperative because we've had sufficient complaints throughout the valley for odors that result from the vapor phase systems. They're not all EcoSorb, I'm sure, but on the other hand, if the purpose of running them, which I don't think the applicant would necessarily do, but if it's there and there for some other reason is odor emanating, it would be a backup. I just don't think it should operate. I don't think they have to take it down.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. And then are you, Commissioner Bradley, wanting the condition related to inspections amended? I know there was discussion, but I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years, okay. And I wanted to throw out, is the commission interested in hearing from the applicant if they are interested in taking on these changes at this point? Or would you like staff to just go do this work and set up a new date and come back?
Well, I'm glad to hear from the applicant, but this is just a continuance, and the applicant will have opportunity to weigh in at that time, and I would encourage the applicant to do that. I, for example, I have no reason to argue with, and I'm saying this is an example, with Commissioner Cooney's suggestion that there be 2 scrubbers, but I don't know how many scrubbers per square feet, and you might say, well, okay, this is something we'll accept, but we think 2 is way overkill and 1's the right idea. I don't know. So I would encourage you to communicate with staff on your suggestions and that we will have an open mind at the next hearing to hear what you think. So I think better to keep our public hearing closed for now and deal with the the motion for continuance and, and let the applicant chew on this and decide what they want to do.
Thank you, Chair. My suggestion, given the back and forth and the drafting that may need to happen, is at least September 27th, which is about 2 months. We could try and force it on the September 13th. There's about 3.5 to 4 hours already on that agenda. September 27th only has one item.
Well, this is where I would like to hear from the applicants is to your availability, one, but also two, whether it makes a difference, whether it's the 13th or the 27th or whatever. I assume since you're already running with this, it doesn't make an operational difference, but you need to tell us. Mr. Edwards, do you mind coming to the stand?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners. My preference would be to do this sooner than later. I will likely be in front of you on September 13th anyways with another project. So for me, scheduling sense, it makes sense to do it on that day. I think the issues that we have are relatively minor to solve with staff. And I look forward to working with them and getting this through the finish line.
Okay. And the 27th, Mr. Seawards, what's on calendar that date? Much?
Is this live? Okay. 27th has ADU ordinance amendments.
Okay, I'm just, yeah. So.
The 13th has an appeal of a wireless, an appeal of CP1 cannabis, the environmental justice element.
Okay. The reason I asked about the other date, and I do favor this September 13 for this hearing, is I'd like to keep some time available later in that month of September for the follow-up on the August 30 workshop.
Okay.
Because we'll have potential need for follow-up for public comment and other things. So I think this works out well. Let's go for the 13th for this matter. And it's your motion, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I will make the motion to continue this matter to the 13th of September for presentation of revised findings and/or project description.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion of the motion? And all in favor, please say, excuse me, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. The motion's carried.
Our chair is
And,
choking.
No further, excuse me. Any further business before the commission today? Then the meeting's adjourned.
Nope.
Cycle that inch long. But now.
Yeah, let's be careful on that, because we might even keep that for that follow-up on the workshop. Yeah, possible, probably not, but we might. What's that?